Greetings and God bless. For decades, I have always been looking at rentals just to see what's available. When I've lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco and moved to Portland, Oregon, and lived out on the East Coast, and different times when I returned east and living in Montana and now in South Dakota, and I'm looking for my next destination. And it's really amazing because in the past couple of years, I've been looking in like third tier cities. I mean, just places no that anybody with the flexibility that would want to live in New York, or want to live in San Francisco or some kind of lively area, you'd never kind of think about certain flyover states and cities, but because of just how impossible it is to get um, for there to even be rentals, it's uh, so I've looked elsewhere, and what I find is that there'll be a roommate rental, and I suspect that the roommate is expecting you to pay their rent as well as your own, because the space, like you're paying for an entire apartment when you're renting a room, and this is like South Dakota, or this is in Virginia or something like that. Like, for what the location offers, the rent should not be that high, because in the location there's not that kind of salary to be made, because it appears to me that people, property managers or landlords, are basing the rents that they are offering in Alabama or in South Dakota. They're looking at New York and San Francisco, and they're pricing their places like it's New York or San Francisco or Portland, Oregon, even in spite of all the fires and the riots and stuff like that. And I've noticed this even before the riots and all these things going on. And I've there's been, in my location, probably 5 places that showed up that were within my what I want to spend. I do not want to spend $600 a month to live in somebody else's home. I've done that before, and it's humiliating. It's disgusting because they use your washcloths and have people and other people's pets over, and there's no communication. I mean, it is a wasteland. It's not a conducive place to share a living space nowadays. People do not communicate, and there's just something weird in people's mentality right now. There's not a whole lot, and this has been going on for years. It's not just a recent thing. Like, there's not people do not know how to navigate, negotiate, communicate, um, speak up, or handle listening to other people describe their needs, um, which is what I learned when I was in college and when I was in San Francisco in the 90s. There was, people had an idea about, roommates and knowing oneself and putting, hey, if they're a smoker or if non-smokers just have to 100%, like you just learn, you just put it out there. And there were so many people. There was this place called Roommate Referral, and it seems to have been scrubbed from history. And so it made it possible to find roommates. And now I cannot find Roommate Referral. I cannot find anything to the equivalent of that agency. And it was just a roommate finding agency. And it just had a self assessment, a really good self assessment, who you are, what you're flexible about, what your deal breakers were, and what you were looking for. And so you could look for places that were seeking a roommate, and and the people that were seeking a roommate could look at who was looking. And so it was this great way of people meeting each other. And it was like a foundational thing in the 90s in San Francisco. Like, just eh, people without a doubt, they went there, and it was rich people, or it was, you know, people who made less money, and I really miss it, because trying to recreate that kind of um, self-awareness and being clear about expectations is very difficult. Like here, I found one place, and I was like, okay, what is it that you're looking for in a roommate? And that person never talked to me again. And I believe they were probably intimidated, because I was like, these things are important to me. And, you know, like, I have spent many years not having standards, or not disclosing my standards, or not making them abundantly clear. And when you fail to do that, number one, people don't take your standards seriously, or they didn't really know what your standards were. Like, one of the things that uh, in one of the places I lived some time ago, I was like, yeah, I have multiple chemical sensitivity. And I was like, have you heard of it? And they were like, yeah, I know about it. But then later, they were using these really highly fragranced items, very strong, um, and it would like fumigate the space. And it took me months, but then I asked them, what do you know about multiple chemical sensitivity? And as I explored months later, they didn't really understand what factors played into um, my experience, or somebody who is sensitive. So anyways, I think it's like people are too impatient to spend the time to really share who they are, care about who they're going to live with. Like, that's what I don't understand, is like, people really are trusting absolute strangers to be roommates, just as long as they pay them money. Um, and I mean, apparently that works. It's just I but I'm not that way, and I haven't found that to work, for complete strangers to be my roommate. Uh, you know, I mean, and I have couch surfed. I mean, I have you know, experienced the milk of human kindness, and hitchhiked and gotten rides with complete strangers. But there is a self selection process for those that do couch surfing, and picking up hitchhikers. And generally, it's a good person. It's an exceptional person generally. So I was just listening to this this Senate hearing that I think was released today. Maybe it was yesterday or sometime this week, and they're talking about housing and how people across the nation don't have access to affordable places to rent or to buy. And I every time I encounter somebody who's insulated, privileged, like their family has lived here for 3 generations, they have no idea what it's like to try to find a rental. They just their greatest difficulty is finding an employee for their family owned business, or something like that, if that. And so and there's this prejudice against people who rent. There's prejudice against people who relocate. And it's really frustrating, because I grew up in a major city. I've lived in a lot of major cities. I love that I've gotten to experience different parts of this nation. I've got to experience the different people that come to the United States of America, and it's a wonderful thing. I mean, like, different cultures. It's been great. It's been wonderful meeting different people and trying different foods and learning about different architecture, or just nice personalities or funny personalities. But the I'm noticing that people are blaming those who don't own a home or who don't have a lucrative career. And what I experienced is there was like this glass ceiling that I reached after I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And because I couldn't pay off my student loans, I didn't, even though I looked into getting a master's or a PhD, because I didn't have my student loans paid off, my college held my transcripts hostage. And by the time I finally got my transcripts, 28 years, 29 years later, I just wasn't thinking about a bachelor's degree or PhD. And, and so that ruins your prospects. And, some people are great social climbers. I just was not uh, in that. Some people, come from really supportive families that ensure that you have your status and your leverage. And when you have status and leverage, that makes for marriage. That's when somebody's looking to marry you. And I watch these different, I watch, how to date videos, or what men are really looking for. And they talk about you know beauty, or they talk about great personality or integrity or something like that. And guys want somebody who has money, um and who has status and leverage, and makes them feel like, I think, like, what I've observed is, like, I think guys want, um at least in my generation, or maybe a little younger, is like, you know, because of the whole weird feminism movement, like, guys want somebody else, kind of to take responsibility for things. And anyway, uh, I noticed that there's kind of uh, blame and shame of of people who are a bit older than me or my peers, uh, against those who are not married and with a home and two cars and four kids or two kids or whatever. And when I was, um, my classmates, not all of them, some of them did follow the traditional thing, even though I went to a very progressive liberal school. But some were more creative. And uh, places I volunteered at, I made friends who were kind of creative people. And so, and oftentimes the creative people that I met, they had some traumas or some chronic health issues. And when there's unresolved emotional stuff, or when there's kind of low grade health issues, it appears to me that that can interfere with your prospects, whether it's a wonderful career, leverage, status, spouse, and lucrative um, means of making a living. And if my parents stayed in wherever they grew up, and if everything turned out differently, and they inherited their parents' houses and land, you know then I would be this coddled, insulated, protected, sheltered, ignorant, naive person who has like so much wealth. There's people, it's just amazing how much wealth people have. And uh and of course they get exploited too. I do notice that, like, people come in, people swoop in, to these kind of insulated communities, and they get a lot of, they whether it, yeah, and it's whether it's a political thing or whether it's a church thing. And uh and so these forces, they come from other parts of the world, other parts of the country. They come to these little nowhere places, They get a bunch of money, they go save souls in Africa or save Trump in wherever. No offense to, I mean, God bless everybody trying to do what they got to do. And yet, those people that live in these little strongholds of nowhere, um, where there's all these homeless people, like there's all this alcoholism, all this drug use, all this psychiatric problem, all this history, murders, like, women, Native women are just disposed of like garbage and nobody cares about, nobody does anything, nobody, it's just a nothing. Um, it's interesting. It's a really uh, um, I don't get it. And so and I guess I come at things from a very unique, weird angle, because I'm not from here, and I'm just an individual. I think for myself, and and the I just find it so frustrating that there's no, like, people, they'll build housing for millionaires. I mean, that's what happened when I was living in Missoula. There was a less than 1% vacancy rate. And they set aside all this land, which they sold to millionaires. So it was like $300,000 for a condo, kind of out in the middle of, nowhere, that not a great location. I mean, it's a beautiful scenic location, but a bit of a hassle. Yeah, and yet there's all these entry level employees, the cashiers and whatnot, that were just literally having to bend over backwards and be subject to the worst abuse by landlords, uh, because there's no housing. And I love old houses and buildings. I hate brand new architecture. Um, but but listening to this Senate hearing, it appears that there are property managers and landlords that buy out properties. They hide behind an LLC so they can get away with slumlord type of behavior. I mean, mold, places are like, yeah, we have mold. That's just how it is. We don't have to do anything about it. And I find that certain type of property managers are like masters in abuse. They like abusing you. They have an intent to abuse and harm, and nobody does anything about it. You can call HUD, or whomever, and so far I don't know of a solution. I mean, I wonder if there's this thing called bonds for the win, that each elected representative has a bond that they have to take out, um, to protect the public, basically, from any harms that elected official will do. And maybe that's some way that we can hold our elected officials to their commitment that they're supposed to protect the public. I mean, that's the whole reason why we have elected officials. If, like, elected officials are not there to fill their pockets and to fulfill some sort of power trip, but that has been how it is. And it's weird because people seem so defenseless. And I mean, I'm defenseless. I don't really understand what's been going on. And I guess that's been the case for everybody. We don't know how to handle, like, these bad people who have who have gotten into positions of power. But back to the housing thing, it's like people who are so insulated and naive, they just blame people for not having a house, not owning a home, or two, and then they also get like homeowners that have a rental property. Because I noticed, I mean, when I was living in Montana, there was all these houses where their lights were out, like really prime location mansions, and their lights weren't on at night. And this was like a lot, like I was noticing is a lot of, no cars in the driveway. I'm like, where are these people? And the thing is, Montana weather is not ideal much of the year. Whether it's summertime and it's fire season and it's all smoky, or wintertime and the sidewalks and the roads are a foot of ice and nobody does anything about it. So, there's a, sometimes a good, month or two throughout the year that's really okay. So I bet those people that own those mansions, they're just living somewhere where the weather is reasonable and they're not, getting smoked out or, you know, having, life threatening driving experience. And the drivers in Missoula are like the worst in the world, or probably the worst in the United States. Anyway, so it's my understanding that there are certain financial things that one can set up when you own a property that even though you're not renting out the property, you still are making money. Like I guess you maybe take out insurance or something like that. So it appears to me that there's a lot of empty rental properties. Like when I was in Montana, and I suspect here in South Dakota, and when I was in Virginia. And this was happening even in San Francisco. Like there would be empty spaces. And San Francisco is always, I mean, it's a hot place to try to get housing. But so I think that there's a lot of empty spaces, and there, like, maybe people make more money by having an empty place that they're not renting out, that they have no intention of renting out. And I think also, like I was saying, that places are like places that are nowhere, places that just don't offer anything, compared to New York or San Francisco. But they're making the rents like they're trying to rent like it's San Francisco or New York. Uh, like these, like nowhere is trying to compete and thinks it deserves to charge you $1,000 for an apartment in the middle of an empty, boring field. And I think that's really questionable, and it's depressing. It's really demoralizing. And I'm thinking, like, when I'm looking for a roommate situation, a new one, and they want you to pay what seems like, what I'm thinking, they want you to pay for the entire place. Um, you know, that doesn't work. So I think it's a really unfair, unlivable time right now if you're renting and you're trying to um, find a home. And there's sanctuary cities. Like when I was in Missoula, it is a sanctuary city, and so they bought a house, they gave a pickup truck, fully paid off house and pickup truck, for people that they just brought in from Africa. Not There was no war from where this location was, but they're just trying to do this feel good kind of activity, but they're not telling the public that this house and this pickup truck was paid off with taxpayer money. And the thing is, like, again, why not help your local cashier who's an American, like, have a housing? Like, did you bring somebody from Africa, buy them and their whole family a house and a car? Like, why not help the 10 cashiers at the Safeway and the Albertsons and the good food, or not the good food store, but the Orange Street Food Farm? Like, why not have great housing for for the people that really are critical to the functioning of the rest of us? Because it's those entry level employees that keep the rest of us, you know, uh, participating in the city. Because when there's nobody to help you, when it's just a wasteland, and there's nobody at the gas station, there's nobody at the grocery store, there's nobody at the cafe, there's nobody going to the gas station, the grocery store, or the cafe. Like, that's a crappy city. That's a creepy city. Nobody wants to be there. You're not going to have tourists. People like seeing a little bicycle walk, going by, and somebody walking their dog, and somebody just in a funny hat or something like that. Like, there is something charming and comforting about the presence of just casual traffic. And yet cities are actively making it so difficult for that kind of person to be around. What they want is they want everybody who's just like really into, really like, I'm just in my car, because that's what the way people are when they've, it seems, or at least that's what I'm observing, is like these people who have been here for 3 generations, they're just going from their house in the suburbs to whatever event that's in the city or whatever, and then they're going back to the house, or they're going to Walmart or whatever. Like, they're not really downtown. They're not really going to the little shop and the other little boutique, and they're not really, nobody walks. Like, nobody that's from here walks when you're in these little uh, centers of the States. Um, like, okay, in New York and San Francisco, you're gonna have like a lot of people walk. It's normal. It's natural. It's not shameful. Like, when you're getting, when you're in like places like Montana and South Dakota, people are like, "What is your problem? Why are you using your legs to get around? You're supposed to have a car." Uh, so it's not really a nice place, when it's hostile to people that walk. It's hostile to people that rent. Like, and I had no idea that there were places that were really just keeping anybody from moving there. I'm part of a freedom oriented group, and they wanted people to fight against affordable housing. Now, I don't know the specifics of it. I don't know if it was something like, some sort of federal something, and I don't believe in the federal government, but it would just be nice if there was more places to live, and if there wasn't just some sort of racket going on. So I am just ranting about how depressing it is, and how it feels like um, it's impossible to find an affordable, reasonably affordable place in a walkable location, um, with that's not as scary, that doesn't have scary weather and scary people in this country. I mean, I have seen a couple places, but then people are wanting the strange um, suffocation and um, putting things in your bloodstream, genetic modification stuff. So it's just these times, I guess. We're just in strange times, and people are bashing homeless people, and I mean, yes, there's some people who are just doing their own thing, and they're addicted to drugs, perhaps, and alcohol, and uh, and yet I think there's more to it, and I think like, if we had other kind of support systems, or more support. I mean, if we weren't trying to take care of Africa, or if we weren't trying to take care of, you know other you know s- other states, like some attorney in DC, like, if we kind of really, really paid attention and took a look at our immediate vicinity, and maybe it has to be private, maybe it has to be this kind of one-on-one thing, and On the other hand, yeah, there's these crazy drugs that people are addicted to. So it's like, it's kind of scary to try to help somebody because, with the weird drugs that people are on and maybe the vaccines that they took and weird electromagnetic sensitivity and fragrances, like it maybe people are kind of a loose cannon, more than maybe 100 years ago. So I guess it just comes down to we have to lean on the Lord. We have to rely on the Lord, and that God is going to turn everything for good. But it is a tough situation, and it's been tough, for many years. It's nothing. It's not necessarily brought about by the immediate situation, because I've been having a hard time finding good situations for years, and I think it's just maybe some sort of cultural shift and people being on medications, and so people aren't really they don't need to deal. They're not they don't have good interpersonal skills. They can't really cope with interpersonal um, dynamics, and and there's probably shortcomings on my own part too. Like maybe if I had influential people around me, if I had a crowd around me that might kind of threaten people, to behave better. I don't know, but yeah. So this Senate hearing about housing, I was just like, wow, thank you for saying that, and thank you for disclosing that there's kind of scammers, and also, like, I think landlords are trying to keep up with the Joneses. So, like here, I was talking to somebody here in Rapid City, South Dakota, and she was saying, "Well, my property manager said I should charge this much rent," and it's like, I bet this. I mean, so these property managers who are influencing these local economies, they're probably like it is not worth $1,000 to rent here in South Dakota. I'm sorry, or at least in Rapid City. Like it's not worth it. It's just the quality of life is not worth it. And yeah, but landlords are getting away with it because Sturgis is here, and it's like this cult um, following, and so landlords are kind of like they get whatever they want. So, and I just have this knack of finding horrible places to try to rent. It seems so. Well, you know what? It's not. It's not. It's that there's this stranglehold on the United States for rentals, and it's not really my fault. It's just that properties have been um, taken, and there's these large property management companies that have no scruples, and the cities themselves have no scruples. They let the property managers do whatever they want, and I don't know if it's bribes or what. Probably maybe that and more. And so it just makes finding a livable hovel very challenging. And I think it's just a terrible crime against humanity because, especially, like I keep on talking about entry level workers. Like, if there was no cashier, if there was nobody working at the grocery store or the gas station or the library or, the post office, I mean, some people's jobs um, probably gets them better housing, but look out for the entry level person who's really had to suffer. I mean, generally they suffer terrible working conditions even before there was a new world order kind of thing going on, but they've had to suffer the worst these past couple of years, and you know they're having to do their car payments and repairs and deal with all that kind of stuff. And I know you do too, but entry level cashiers are on their feet all day, thankless job. They don't get I mean, they're kind of hostages to their paycheck. I just have a lot of sympathy for them, and I think housing would be, if somebody could feel secure that there was places to rent, because that's the thing. Like I don't like relocating somewhere where there's just one place to rent. Uh, like I want to relocate where there's 10 places at any given time available, like options, ranges, but reasonable. And that used to be, I've been places where there was like hundreds of places available. Maybe not hundreds, but dozens, hundreds in the grand scheme. But now, like some places, there's like no place to rent, or at least that I can see on Craigslist, or if it's available on, Zillow or something like that, it's like $1,000, $1,500. I mean, do people really spend $1,500 on some of these crappy houses that are available for rent? I mean, in crappy locations, it's just like tragic, because those places are not worth it, in my opinion. And I guess it's just this hostage slave thing where people are a hostage to the housing market, and they just they have no choice. And that's what property managers and landlords are doing. And and I mean, of course, somebody who owns a property, yeah, they deserve to profit. But I get a sense that, I mean, if they're, they have to pay what, $200, let's say $250 in their mortgage a month, charging $1,000, so you're like, that seems like a quite an exponential um, markup. And yeah, but the thing is, people are living their really glamorous Instagram life, having multiple homes and traveling, and got to, go do this, have this expensive car, and have this expensive purchase, and have this expensive expense, um, at the expense of the working, person that keeps things really running. Like I do think that working people, entry level working people, are more important than property managers. Property managers are kind of evil pods doing the bidding of landlords. It seems to me. Not all of them, of course. I don't know all of them, but in my limited experience, they're pretty crummy, bad. That's a pretty bad industry. It's a pretty corrupt, evil industry. Property managers, they do gaslighting and abuses, and it's like institutional, and it's deliberate, and they know that they're going to do crummy things. So yeah, and I keep wondering, I mean, what are people in my situation supposed to do? Are we supposed to just hike out into the wilds of Alaska and just die somewhere? Because, landlords are not making it possible to rent a decent place for a decent price. And I know there's viewers who are going to be like, well, you should just pay $1,500 for an apartment. You should just make that much money. And the thing is, like, just on principle, I do not want to pay $1,500 for some of these places. Like, generally, I don't want to pay $1,500. I think I'd have a better use. I'd rather invest that in supplements or in a workshop or something like that. So that's just my opinion and my observation of current events, current dynamics. So I put that Senate hearing in the description box in case you're interested. It's a fairly lengthy, it's like maybe over an hour, but the beginning part is worth a listen. So I think I got this all out of my system. Thank you for listening. God bless.